Hey, this is Tim Ellis. I am back talking about some of my paintings from my artist series, and behind me is my Tamara De Lempicka painting. And this is an artist that I wasn't super familiar with when I set out on this series. And as I researched more artists, she just kept coming up. And the more I learned about her, the more intrigued I was with her. She's a really interesting woman and an incredible painter. And at a time when there weren't a lot of female artists really out there working, and she's had a pretty interesting life too. So I wanted to talk about why I painted her and why I saw her as an incredibly important and iconic artist, as a person, and also just as a visual artist that really changed culture and changed the art world for good. So let's talk about her a little bit, and I'll click on over to our slideshow and show you some stuff about her. Okay, so here are a couple of images of her. Really dramatic woman. So born in Warsaw, Poland in 1898, which was part of the Russian Empire. And two different times she was a refugee from wars, which is pretty interesting. Now, if you look at these images of her painting, she is just uberly dramatic. So she's constantly voguing and looking full of intrigue and incredibly beautiful and dramatic and very theatrical in her life and her presentation. And her art echoes that. You see really beautiful paintings of people in dramatic poses, and her work just is triumphant in those ways as far as I'm concerned. So during the Russian Revolution, and I'm just reading off this slide here, in 1917, her husband was arrested by the Bolsheviks, and after securing his release, they fled Russia and became political refugees in Paris. So refugees from two different wars. Now, I'm actually going to click to the next slide here. Just some other great photos of her. I'm going to minimize me for a minute so you can see this great photo of her on the right. So look at the sorts of ways she is photographed, and you'll see that a lot of her paintings echo these poses. Reclining, cascading fabric, dramatic poses of the head and the arms. Very, very, very theatrical. And I love that about her. So the second slide mentions that as a Jewish artist living in Paris, she was again at risk during World War II, and in 1940, ahead of the Nazi occupation, she fled France, where she was living at the time, for the United States. And I was unaware until I actually just put the slideshow together that she was living in Los Angeles, which is where I am, and later New York. So kind of cool. I didn't know she was in LA, which is super great. Let's go ahead to the next image here. So this is my painting of her. You can see it behind me, and then I also just popped it into this slide. It's a big painting. I'm actually gonna back up towards the end of the slideshow and just show you how big it is. But it's 4 feet tall, and super vivid and colorful, and I went through a lot of photos to find one that I felt really kind of captured her in all of her splendor, and also kind of with her intense gaze and colors, and the intensity that I see coming through her. So whenever I'm doing one of these portraits, what I'm trying to do is capture the person physically and also some of their essence, who they really are. And this is a painting that I really, really like. I like how her one eye is kind of larger than the other, and there's kind of a glassy intensity and a depth in there. Towards the end of the slideshow, I'm going to show you a close-up. Actually, it might be my next slide. Let's see. It is. It's my next slide. Okay, so you can really see closely. There's a lot going on in the reflection in these eyes and the different big patches of color. The slideshow I did right before this one was talking about my painting of Gauguin, and I have some similar patches of color in the way I painted him, and also with her. So she is considered an artist of the Art Deco period, and she's one of the main, if not the main, artist of that period. And it's great that she's also a woman at a time, like I said, there were not a lot of women artists, because it was still really hard for women socially to climb that ladder. There was a lot of oppression. It was art was still a boys' club, as well as politics and other things. Tamara married up and kind of ended up in the upper echelons of society, even after being a refugee twice, which is pretty amazing. And apparently she had this great nickname. I might have to pause and Google it, but it wasn't the czar with the brush, but it was something, the female version of that. And I'll look it up and I'll add it at the end. Let's go to the next image. All right. So here's some of her work. I'm going to minimize me again. All right. So what I like about these is, first of all, they're very vertical pieces, and you don't see a lot of full-bodied. These almost look like fashion sketches, but at the same time, there's all this drama in the faces and the body position and the gesture. And there's elements of cubism going on in her work that I absolutely love. Look at the simplicity with which the fabric is rendered, and there's all this upward movement. And then in the image on the right, as you look back behind it, the fabric kind of morphs into these stairs, and then behind the stairs, there's architecture, which becomes a city off to the left of the figure in black. The women on the left, notice how the hair kind of cascades down and becomes this huge element of design, pulling our eyes through the composition and down to those green shadows underneath. And there's kind of a lot of her work has eyes looking upward, almost rolled back in the head in kind of a creepy gesture, and a lot of the hand positions are almost like we see in Christian icons, where there's strange hand positions symbolizing things, but in these there's just always kind of an awkward gesture, and there's just a strangeness to her work that just to me is incredibly intriguing and compelling. You're seeing a lot of that same gesture here, and again on the right, even though these eyes don't look rolled up in the head, there's an intense brightness to the eyes where there's so much white that is almost overpowering. Where notice the figure on the left, we're not seeing that so much, posing with his test tube and microscope, but we're seeing that zigzag clothing design and contrapposto of the human form, which is a term where we see a gesture imposed on the human form by a shift of the hips, where we move the upper and lower torso in kind of a zigzag position. We're seeing that in him as well. And that's one of the main things you also see in Art Deco is this zigzag futuristic composition, which I think is just so well done in her work. She's also known for a lot of erotic work and nudes. So another thing about Tamara is that she was bisexual and also had a lot of affairs and this was in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and it was considered very shocking at the time for her to be doing that. Even today, when someone has an affair, it's considered that way, but she was very progressive and very free with her sexuality, and had apparently many, many love affairs. And so we have not only a female artist, but a bisexual female artist who's also a political refugee, and because of ethnicity and religious background. So a lot going against her, and producing absolutely stunningly beautiful work, which we've all seen parts of somewhere. You'll definitely recognize at least one or two pieces. As I started looking through her work, I just kept finding more and more and more that I loved. Even this beautiful shell, very Georgia O'Keeffe in its sexuality, with the two little pearls and the glass and the fabric, and we see the same thing in these flowers. One of the things I notice is that within her style, there's a lot of movement. Notice the figure on the left, very Botticelli-esque, where on the right, you're seeing a lot more simplification of the hairstyle and into the angles we talked about before, where on the left, not quite so much. It's a lot more flowing. And you'll see a few other pieces that I chose like this. I think both of these images, it's kind of funny that I put these together because they're both kind of looking the opposite direction, but the tears and the drama in the faces, just gorgeous. So here's an image of her again on the left. And a lot of her imagery looks a heck of a lot like her. And she also dated some women who also looked a bit like herself. But I do believe that she is showing up in some of these portraits as well. Apparently, there's a few of her daughter who she was pretty estranged from. Her daughter did not see her a lot growing up because there was so much going on in Tamara's life. But check out the pose. It's so great. We don't need to talk about every single one of these, but look at this crazy head position. Unless an anvil recently fell on your head, you're not going to be able to have your head and your neck in a comfortable position in that way. But somehow it works, and it's just all this downward weight. You kind of feel the weight of the head on the pillow and the arm and the pages flipping, which adds a lightness to it, and then the incredible soft colors in the nude body are just so beautiful. I like the distortion and the angularity. Notice the figure on the right, very angular, very geometric, very Art Deco in the zigzag composition we're seeing, and the way the eyes are painted, the interesting facial gesture in the hands, and then the dove. And then on the left, once again, we're seeing a lot more curvaceous lines, a lot of curvilinear shapes. Now we see some simplification in the hair that we're seeing in some of the other pieces, but a lot of variety in her work that definitely does not all fit in the same exact style. I think the one on the right is very Bride of Frankenstein. I'm not sure which came first. That would be interesting to know. But look at the eyes again, rolled up on the head on the left and kind of washed out in a very creepy way. But there's also a little bit of a homoerotic element happening here. And then the woman on the left is just so beautifully reclining and covering herself, but not covering herself, and in kind of this incredibly soft gesture. So many of these pieces are just so beautiful. The light in this one, wow. And look how simplified the hair is. We're not really seeing an attempt for realism at all. And yet this is actually incredibly realistic, but not at all. There's a streamlined, stylized element to it. And that's a big part of what we see in Art Deco, where Art Nouveau was more curved lines and natural scenes. Art Deco had angularity, futuristic elements, shiny chrome, and things like that. And we kind of even see that in the way the body's painted here. It's almost luminescent copper or something. I love the telephone. How about how the hair is almost like strips of gold? And those eyes are just so intriguing and compelling. When I painted her portrait, I tried to include some of that depth in her eyes, but also some of the looseness with which I like to paint. And then we've got these incredibly luminescent eyes on the figure on the left. She did have some incredibly beautiful portraits of men here too. This one on the right, I just love how I'm not exactly sure where his jacket ends and his knee begins and his hip is and what's background and what's foreground, but it almost looks like an AI image, how you might expect an extra hand. His hand that shows up on his knee almost seems like, oh, there's a hand there. But and the forest in the background. Well, I guess it's just a tree, but we'll go along with forest. But I love how that kind of shows up and just guides us through. A lot like some of Gauguin's pieces, or even Rousseau's The Jungle. Great photo of her here on the left, very similar to the photo I used to paint her. And then the one on the right, look at the stack of houses that's kind of piled up in the corner. Really like this piece. And very similar to the prior one of the man, notice how the tree is just kind of guiding our eyes through the whole background. And even the clouds have a similar composition to the homes. these pieces just inspire me to paint. I think there's such an element that I want to know the narrative. You know, who is that woman? What's going on with that woman? And apparently some of her paintings were of her lovers, which I think when we're so drawn into the character, sometimes I wonder if that's one. I'm not an expert on her and her life, but I am incredibly impressed with her work and inspired by it. I love kind of the expansion of the figures here. We see this in some of Picasso's work too, some of that blockiness that we talked about in Matisse's work, and a lot of other artists kind of went into this form where you almost look like you took a tire pump and just inflated the person, a couple pumps, but just enough to kind of add a smoothness and a simplification of the human form. I love these women's hats on the left. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the sculpture of Gustav Vigeland, but Vigeland does these huge pillars of entwined figures, mainly sculpted in granite, which sculpting in granite is like the hardest substance on earth to sculpt in, but very similar to these. There's kind of a Soviet-inspired simplicity and absence of expression in these, but I still love the way the figures are rendered. And we see a lot of that same sort of thing with these: the simplification, the lightness of the eyes, the dramatic gesture, the stacked homes in the background, the geometry juxtaposed against the curvaceous forms. A little bit erotic. Notice a lot of the gestures used over and over again. I'm going to get me out of there for a minute. Almost the exact same pose. Like, obviously the hands are a little bit different, almost in reverse, but the gesture of the head, the composition of the overall piece, really similar from piece to piece here. And I love the buildings and then on the right we've got this a little bit of buildings, but the billowy fabric behind. I'm not sure if you're getting the same aesthetic wow that I am out of these, but I think they're incredibly dynamic. Okay, these two pieces were a complete anomaly. I'm gonna vanish for a second again, meaning they don't fit in with the rest, but I did find a couple pieces of hers that were very different than anything else I had found. And I absolutely love these pieces. I love kind of the nightmarish, wild, windblown hair of the woman on the right. And there's a similarity to that on the woman on the left, and kind of a compelling sadness in both of these. And very, very different than we've seen in some of the other ones. The attention to detail in the hands on the right, and the weathered, harrowed, is that the right word? Harrowed face on the right. And then those storm clouds. Wow. Okay, so these are her last two pieces apparently, and they were painted with palette knife, which they don't look like palette knife at all. But what I read is that these were considered her least successful pieces. Some of her last few pieces painted with a palette knife. I love the one on the left. I think it's epic. I think, you know, it has everything we talked about. I love the simplification of the form. I love the gesture. I love the figure. I want to know more about her. The one on the right, I'm not as drawn into personally as much, wondering who she is so much. But I still think they're both incredibly visually exciting pieces, and definitely continue to have that wow factor. All right, and back to my piece. So if you liked hearing a little bit about why I painted her, that's great. Tamara De Lempicka from Warsaw, Poland, also from Paris, France, Los Angeles, New York, and apparently died in Mexico. She moved to Mexico before her death. I'm going to show you my piece a little closer up in just a second, but this piece is still available. I have prints of it. I have paper prints that you can contact me individually if you're interested in those. I don't have those on my website yet, but I do have posters, and the actual original is still for sale. So if you really like that one, you can check it out on my website. I'll put a link to it. Also, if you are interested in learning drawing from me or watching any of my other videos, I will post a link to my website down here. Please subscribe, please like, please share. And if you'd like to learn to draw from me, if you sign up on my website for my mailing list, I will send you a free lesson and you can see if it's something you'd like to pursue or not. All right, I'm going to go to my big image here. And let's make this go away for just a second. Okay, I'm going to walk back over to this painting just so you can kind of get a sense of just how big it is. All right, so here's me next to painting. You can see my head compared to her head. She is very big. She's 4 feet tall. And when I sit next to her, you can see this is a big painting. So anyway, just wanted you to be able to kind of see it in real life. Obviously, the colors aren't quite lit perfectly because it's just hanging on a wall right here. But I wanted you to be able to see the scale of it because it's. I've had several people tell me this is your best piece, and some people are like, "Who's that?" Now you know. All right. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Tim Ellis.